Hey everybody. In class lately we've been working a lot with fractions and decimals. Tonight we're going to specifically talk about adding and subtracting decimals. Now this can be a little tricky, especially once we start talking about subtraction. So before we get to that, I want to go back and review when we talked about comparing decimals. Remember when we were comparing decimals, we want to line up the decimals by the decimal point. So if I have 42.6 and 42.489, if I line them up like this, it's a lot easier to compare the place values because we're comparing the tens with the tens, the ones with the ones, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. And remember, I can make this a little more clear by always adding a 0 in the missing place values. And now, if I'm going to compare these, I look at the tens first, 4s are the same, 2s are the same, and when I get here I notice the 6 is bigger than the 4, so by comparing the place values, I know that 42.6 is greater than 42.489. Now, the reason I wanted to review that is because when we add and subtract decimals, we do the same thing. The first step is to line up the decimal points, just like we did when we compare. So let's take our first example, example A here, and we'll do that. We have 2.8, and we're going to add 6.512. Notice I put the two decimal points right above and below each other. I lined them up vertically. So before I add here, I'm going to fill in my missing place values, right? I can add zeros on the end of a number after the decimal without changing the value. And now all I do is do the normal addition. 0 plus 2 is 2, 0 plus 1 is 1, 8 plus 5 is 13. We carry the 1, 1 plus 2 is 3 plus 6 is 9. And the decimal just comes straight down when we add, so we put it right here after the 9. And there's our answer, 9.312. We're going to do the same thing here. Now, I don't see a decimal in this first number, but we know with a whole number, we always have the decimal hiding right behind it. So, I'm going to line that up, 65 plus 12.07, right? And I can always write my decimal and put two zeros, and notice my decimals are lined up vertically. And now all I have to do is add 7, 0, 5 plus 2 is 7, 6 plus 1 is 7. So we get 77.07. Now, when we get to subtraction, we start the problems the exact same way. We set them up just like we did before. So I'm going to write 22.1, and we're going to subtract 3.49. Notice, just like in the addition problems and when we compare, the decimals are always lined up vertically. Now I'm going to make sure I put a 0 in this missing place value. If we don't do that, that's where a lot of mistakes get made. Now, when we subtract, I have to look at each place value, and I can't do 0 minus 9, right? So I have to borrow from this 1. That 1 becomes a 0, and this 0 becomes a 10. So now I can do 10 minus 9, and that gives me 1. And I can't do 0 minus 4, so I have to borrow from this 2. That becomes a 1. I carry my 1 over right there, and I have 10 minus 4 equals 6. And I can't do 1 minus 3. I've got to do a lot of borrowing in this problem. So that becomes 11. 11 minus 3 is 8. And 1 minus 0 is 1. And I put my decimal right here. Decimal comes straight down. So 18.61 is our answer. Now, in that last problem, we had to borrow from just about every digit. In this problem, I can already tell we're going to have to do a lot of borrowing too. But that's going to be okay as long as we set up the problem correctly. We should be able to get it right. So I'm going to put my decimal point here, 951, and 8, I can write as 8.000. So now my numbers are the same length, and I can start subtracting. But this is where it gets tricky when we have a lot of zeros in a row, because I can't do 0 minus 1, right? That's not going to work, so I have to borrow. but I can't borrow from here because this is 0. We don't have any numbers to borrow. So I have to look here, but I can't borrow from here either. So I have to borrow from this 8. So this 8 is going to become a 7. This 0 is going to become a 10. And now I can borrow from that 10, right? I can borrow from that 10. That's going to become a 9. And now this 0 is going to become a 10. And now I can borrow from that. So that 10 becomes 9. And this 0 becomes a 10. So see, I had to borrow from all of those numbers just to get back to this first one. And now I can do 10 minus 1. So that's going to give me 9. 9 minus 5 is 4. 9 minus 9 is 0. 7 minus 6 is 1. And my decimal comes straight down. So we have 1.049. So when we see problems like this, where we have lots of zeros, it is where we need to be especially careful when it comes to borrowing. But as long as we line our decimals up between the two numbers when we're subtracting and we make sure we borrow correctly, we should be able to get these right.